Wasabi guys, welcome back to another Market Watch video. This time we're going to be taking a look at the major changes, both gains and losses, since last week. We're talking about the week of March 10th, 2022. Before we get into it, first I would like to remind you, if you appreciate these videos, if you like what I'm doing with the Market Watch, please subscribe to the channel. We're making serious progress this year. I enjoy having you here with me. First one we have to talk about is Wandering Mage, a reserve list card. You know, I don't typically talk about major reserve list changes because I think it's more important when you actually understand how the market works. And there is a difference between, when you're looking at this chart, the average in the market. Those are two completely different things. This is trending more so on mtgstocks.com because someone listed this for an astronomically high price. If the average is getting closer to 30, that means that someone listed this for probably $100 or more. But listing something is a lot different than actually selling it. And if the market price is that much lower at only around $3, there is no way in hell you're going to be able to sell this for up to 30. This happens a lot with the reserve list. You see this with buyouts. People will go and buy something like this, and they'll buy hundreds of them. But that's actually preferred because at least there is a transaction. Someone is willing to pay for the card. This is actually the seller trying to influence the market and hoping that maybe monkey see, monkey do comes into play, and suddenly other sellers are wanting to sell this for around $30 or maybe more, depending on what the listing says. Whenever there's an outlier like this and there's one person who's listing it for a lot of money, I wouldn't budge a penny above where you see the market price right now. If it's not selling for more than $3.33, you totally shouldn't buy it. I do talk about gainers, and I think this is one where you are going to see it go up just out of the interest of Wandering Mage. More people might be paying attention to it because of the fact that it's trending now on MTG stocks. But this card is not a good card. It's not desirable in any way outside of it being reserve list. It's not a legendary creature, so get that out of your mind. The abilities just make it a very bad mana sink. The only place you're going to play it is either in Legacy or Commander. It's just not close to being competitive enough to be played at all in either of those formats. The next one we have here is Hidetsugu Consumes All, the saga from Kamigawa Neon Dynasty. You're obviously going to see some volatility in newer cards. Kamigawa Neon Dynasty released last month, so people are still trying to figure out what's working in Standard, maybe what's working in Modern. People get a better understanding of just how playable a card like this is, so it settled around a couple dollars. But now we're looking at above 10, so if you are someone who is more focused on the standard metas, this is something you're obviously going to want to pay attention to more so than anything else. This isn't the only time this video we're going to be talking about Kamigawa related influence. We have some cards that are going down because of Kamigawa Neon Dynasty, so we'll talk about that later. Next up we have Seasoned Pyromancer Modern Horizons. This card has done pretty well. I'm not a big fan of Modern, I don't play it myself, but that's clearly where the value is here with Seasoned Pyromancer. As you can see, it is rather consistent with the average listing price and what it's being sold for, close to 40. Cards are always going to be listed for more than what they're actually being sold for. And this is simply because sellers want to sell it for the most that they can get, and buyers want to buy it for the lowest price that they can get. What you'll find is that there are plenty of sellers who list it too high and either have to list it lower or they don't sell it at all, and there are buyers who just simply won't buy a card if it's too expensive. So being a $40 card, being able to sell it for around 40 and it being listed closer to 50 is not that extreme. Wandering Mage was an extreme difference in the average listing and the average market sold. So last time this card made significant gains, we're talking about early summer of last year. Now it's looking to make new gains here, and we could see it reach all-time highs. Next up we have a card from an old set, not a reserve list card, but one from Tempest, Ancient Runes, and this is pretty common as well. You'll see old cards that maybe weren't printed that often, that aren't reserve list. They're only like 25 cents, maybe 50 cents at best. Then people start to speculate on the playability. What this card does is actually pretty unique. During each player's upkeep, Ancient Runes deals 1 damage to that player for each artifact he or she controls. So if you're playing against an opponent who has a lot of treasure tokens, likewise with more vehicle artifact strategies, they don't want to have to take a bunch of damage. This is pretty cool. It's enough to take it from a 25-cent card to over $1. Which again, you should always pay attention to that market price, because when you go to sell your cards, they only care about what something is being sold for. So for you to be looking at a 400% gain, I still think you have something pretty decent. And next up we have Drown in Dreams from the Commander set Innistrad Midnight Hunt. This is another one I called, and when I call them I do like to brag a little bit. When looking at Drown in Dreams, I knew that this was going to be an extremely playable card in Commander. You choose one out of these two modes. If you have your Commander, you get both, which makes it incredibly unique, that much value that you get compared to other similar instant speed X-costed draw spells. So looking at it even just earlier this year, we were talking about a $2 card. Now the fact that it's over $6 and being sold above $6 should give you a good idea of the premium that is placed on Commander exclusive cards. These are the cards that you're only going to get out of the precon decks. These aren't going to be on shelves forever. And individual Commander decks, if they're desirable, retailers tend to mark them up. And I think this specific precon deck, the zombie one from Innistrad Midnight Hunt, was definitely the more desirable of the two precon decks released alongside that set. Next up we have one of our last gainers here. We have Kykar Wind's Fury. This is now above $10, and I think a lot of that has to do with the vehicle strategy. You have probably the strongest colors for a vehicle strategy in blue, red, and white. In addition to that, Kykar does create 1/1 white spirit creature tokens with flying each time you cast a non-creature spell. So you have easy ways of enabling the vehicle strategy in addition to just providing you with more red mana if you need it. It's to no one's surprise Kykar has been a pretty strong commander if you're playing more of a spell slinger strategy, but because people are starting to recognize Kykar as a viable vehicle commander option, the value for this commander option has improved. And again, the average listing price, the average market price, you have to pay attention to those two numbers. The closer they are together, it means that the value there is legitimate if you're just focusing on the highest number. Now we get to talk about some losers, the cards that are actually losing their value. Now there's a bit of a misconception here when we talk about cards that are increasing in value and cards that are going down. Just because a card is going down, that doesn't always mean that it's going to keep going down. Just like if a card keeps going up, it doesn't mean it's going to keep going up. There is no way of predicting with 100% accuracy if a card will recover and when it will recover, when a card will go down and when it will go down. And you also need to understand the context behind this chart, because it's not just for the collectability. This was all speculation. Opalai Kanda's Yojimbo is really nothing beyond the speculation for Kamigawa Neon Dynasty and the potential for the return of the Bushido mechanic. It might have some value for Samurai, but I'm thinking it was mostly for the fact that it was a weird, obscure card that maybe would receive support in newer sets, and it just didn't. You were kind of playing the lottery here. If you were a speculator, you love seeing a return to an older plane because it means the likeliness of adding more support to previous cards and previous strategies. Bushido, unfortunately, was not one of them. I don't even think we got decent ninjutsu support. So if you were betting on shrines, that was about it. If you just did nothing but collect those old shrine cards, you got a ton of value out of those. But with Bushido, you have from these older Kamigawa sets a really weird, undesirable keyword that maybe some people were hoping would receive support to maybe improve it. Unfortunately, that didn't quite work out. So it did go up for the past 6 months in speculation for this set, but now you're going to see it come down from its all-time highs. And really, for the past year, to see it go from maybe a couple dollars to a $7 or $8 card, that's something that I would take. I wouldn't feel too bad about that. Another card that's been going down, but it's been pretty steady, Umbra Sphere Manifest. This happens pretty often. It's usually pretty easy to predict. When a commander option is introduced, it is initially popular. People really receive it well. They want to continue playing it, but you should always remember that with popular commander options, they are still specific to their own strategy, and unless it's something that you can see being a versatile option that is always going to receive support, you can expect it to go down. And Umbris has been going down since its release. The good thing though is that it's not crashing in value, so people haven't immediately just given up on it. People are still willing to build decks, they're still willing to buy Umbra Sphere Manifest, just not for around $10 or above. Next up we have Hallowed Haunting. We discussed this before, just last week. Only reason why this is coming down is because it's reaching all-time highs. If you're able to sell it off for $20, I think that's probably the best you're going to do. extreme volatility here. For a while there, you were able to get it for around $4 or $5 and flip this for a tremendous profit. But you should probably know by now that wasn't going to be very long-lived. So whenever you have newer cards like these from newer sets, just know that if it's in the 20s, if it's in the 30s, weigh the potential outcome of it either going to maybe $50 or it coming back down to around 4 or 5. And I think you're going to realize with the majority of cards, they tend to go down under 20 way more often than when they go back above it. Next up, we have Higure the Still Wind. Have been talking about the speculation here for a while, and this is another case of the card either going up or going down. And I think regardless of the outcome of ninjutsu not really receiving a ton of support in Kamigawa Nia Dynasty, Higure was still going to go up. This was a set where, with adjacent pre-constructed products, you would probably expect it to be reprinted. Since it did not receive a reprint, its value started to skyrocket, but it's also going to come back down once people realize that, yeah, it didn't get reprinted, but ninjutsu also didn't receive much support. We're not talking about the new commander option that gives your other creatures ninjutsu in your hand, because that had nothing to do with the older ninjutsu cards that didn't impact the value whatsoever. You don't need to play any of these old ones to make that deck great. So people are also starting to weigh the fact that these older ninjutsu cards are rather niche, and $20, $20 to $30 is probably the best you're going to do for Higure. And the last card to talk about is Sliver Legion. Now this, alongside a lot of other Future Sight cards, got reprinted, so we were naturally going to see a decrease in value. People a couple years ago were spending $100 for this card. That's sort of my rule. I don't spend that much money on something if it's in extreme danger of being reprinted. There was also the fact that slivers are also pretty niche, and that's really the only reason why you would ever want one of these. Why would I spend that much money on a card that I'm probably not going to be playing that often? It's not reserve list. It was in extreme danger of being reprinted because a lot of people wanted it. So now you're seeing it down closer to $25. And it's been on a steep decline here ever since the reprint released. Once you see it go down below the previous all-time low for the market price, that's when you know it's going to have to recover from an even lower price point. So once it breaks that previous support, because as you could see back in early 2020, it reached that previous low, but then it recovered. What it did this year, it reached that low and it kept going lower. So now anything could happen. It could keep going lower. If we don't receive any sliver support, if we don't have any reason to continue building sliver decks, this could go down to $10. It's still a desirable sliver for sliver decks, but that's all it has going for it. So anyway, that was the Market Watch for March 10th, 2022. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Commander Void here signing off. I will see you all next time.